you are talking about language, because language, in fact, in my view, is one of the most creative components of the human species. I mean, we create language all the time. We work with language all the time. So you have, and language itself is dynamic. It's very, very dynamic. So it's very, very diverse. One is talking about performing arts, one is talking about digital arts, one's talking about audiovisual products, one's talking about, all sorts of visual arts. One is talking about really the whole spectrum of creativity. And of course, most of these elements are interlocked. They are interrelated. And therefore, they call for a very dynamic mind to be able to see the various elements of it. So if you are doing, for example, research around an audiovisual piece, you will deal with issues of language, you'll deal with issues of sound, you'll deal with issues of images, you'll deal with all sorts of things. And therefore, the interconnection, the interlocking nature of the various subsectors of creativity immediately poses a challenge for any researcher. And I want to mention the next one to give my colleague a chance. The next challenge that you always encounter is the dynamic nature of creativity. Creativity is not something that is locked and therefore you can do surgery around it. It is always moving. It's, I always say, even as a writer, that my book is not finished until it rolls off the press. Even when it is with the printer, I'm still following it because I discovered something along the way which needed to be changed, And that is the nature of creativity. It's not something that is, closed. It's very open. And therefore, because it is very, very open, it provides a challenge to the researcher in terms of the locking. At what point do you because, and we're not just talking about the process of production. We are also talking about the various elements of meaning, because the meaning in creativity is very fluid. It is very open. A song, a composition, which I enjoy, has multiple layers of meaning depending on the person receiving it and the various interpretations and histories that I bring into that experience. Therefore, there are huge challenges with the researching the sector, but that challenge is also an opportunity for us to do more. So I guess that's the long and short of it, but of course there are many other facets. But just to think about the diversity of the sector and its interlocking nature, and also the dynamic nature of the sector and its lack of closure. It's always open, and that as a researcher, you have to open, your mind to be able to see the various elements, and therefore traditional ways of reading, traditional ways of doing evaluation in for example, the natural sciences cannot, be used effectively to assess the creative sector because of its very nature. And therefore, we have to come up with more creative ways of actually researching the sector because of the ways in which it is actually constituted. Yeah.
I'd pose the same question to you. Would you have any responses regarding the larger challenges you've experienced in your research work?
Yeah, I agree with Prof. I think so. I'll add now. Let me say, as a younger scholar, I think one of the major challenges that we have faced in terms of research of creative work is, I don't know whether to call it decolonization of the mind and the effect of NGOs in Africa. Because when you go to get some research in the ground, at the grassroots level, the first thing is not where it's going, it's how much are you paying us? And that has been one of the greatest challenges for young researchers, especially if they are not being sponsored. Let me say, for instance, some of the master's students that we have, their research is not being sponsored. A lot of PhD students, their research is not being sponsored, and they go to the ground, and the first question is, how much are you paying us? People rarely care much about where this information is going. And so sometimes there is that lack of access to for the researcher, because they're not able to get as much information. And yet, on the other hand, you're also being told if you pay people, you're contaminating the information they're going to give you. So that's quite a big challenge for the young researchers. But when we also look at the other side, a lot of young researchers, people say Africans don't love reading or Kenyans don't love reading. We love experiences more than reading. And so one of the challenges that I have encountered as ZP, and also I believe some of our students and colleagues have faced, is that, especially being in the creative sector, a lot of our research is not practical oriented. And yet we want to collect data on the creative industry, trends and all, but we want people to fill questionnaires. Yet in the creative industry, we are performers, we are creators, but we are not using more practical or engagement or community engagement methods to collect this data. Like, why are we filling questionnaires when you can have forum group discussions? Why are we still filling the same questionnaires when we can have role play and role reversal, when we can be like an active observer, participant observer? But we want to send questionnaires online and wait and remind people online to please fill the questionnaire and remind them, And when it comes to the creative sector, we need to go there, observe, engage. So it is also a hindrance based on some of the methodologies that have been there since time immemorial. Right now, that's why I'm saying, as a young scholar, some of the challenges we are facing right now is you find, despite the fact that I have my PhD in theater arts, and right now I need to do research papers so that I can become a professor like him. One of the challenges we have is that as a creative, you have to write a paper, but whether I do 100 movies, whether I do how many theater productions, the system does not recognize that to put up a full-length play, you needed to research on that character, you need to research on that script, on that plot, and that is research. And no one wants to look at this process, whether you document it or not. They're like, okay, after you're finished, just write down. So that is a big hindrance. So for me, it's that's why I say it's decolonization of the mind, that things have changed. Like you said, Prof, art is very dynamic. And I think it is time that people understood that if we want to really do research in the creative sector, we really need to understand, where are we now? Artists want to create. If we want to do that research, let's go document it. Then we can be able to see what they are doing and document that. Not tell the same artist to do it and document it. If I am performing and Churchill comes and documents it, that third eye of Churchill documenting it is very profound in giving the audience or other future readers a very better observation for that. Like right now, we have got these these handbooks that we've gotten. I was telling Churchill the other day, like, I am so excited, especially for the one for financial management, because if Churchill is telling me that they've done needs assessment on the ground and that is very practical based, if I am teaching my students on financial management and I use that, it is very highly practical based than just using something that was developed by a business student who believes that a particular theory is going to work for the creative arts. So these are the kind of researchers that we need. So the challenge, yes, is sometimes maybe we need to change our mindset also as artists, not just the others who are researching on us. As artists, we also need to welcome the idea of research. a lot of times as artists, we also don't want to share so much information. Somebody asks you, so how did you come up with an idea? And the first thing you say, I just came up with it. I just thought about it. Can you just share how you came up with it? Like, what is the first thing that came to your mind? If you saw the first thing that came to your mind, is it the color pink? Then you thought of a young person. Then you develop, oh, what about this young person on the streets of Nairobi? And then what if? Like, how many what ifs did you ask yourself to develop a plot? It is not that you just came up with it. How did you come up with it? So the other challenge of creatives is that we don't know how to communicate per se. We believe our work should communicate, but we should also look at ourselves as the channel of communication, so that if we need to share this information, because 20 years down the line, how will they know how you did your work? I was talking to a student of mine who recorded the process of rehearsal of my Wine Woman play. And I asked him today, I told him, this is the third time I'm asking you, how can I get the footage of the work you shot? And we had almost a 2-hour engagement where we were discussing, like, he did not like shoot the whole play. He was shooting the process of rehearsals. And if you look at some of the work that right now we have got footage of completed works, a lot, isn't it? Like how the show was from beginning to the end, but we have not documented processes. Are we documenting processes? Because that is research. So as artists, another challenge that we have is, are we open to people documenting our process? Because we should not think of it like, oh, the person will steal our idea. No, what will the person going to do with that? Think of it as archiving a process, archiving your creation process, which can really help you also another time, and can also help the future generation, because we don't know if Charlie Chaplin was not recorded, would we have known the kind of works he was doing right now? Yeah, so I think I'll stop there.
Quite a lot to digest from what you've said. One of the challenges and one of the reasons why this is me contributing my challenge is one of the reasons why we have this launch today and not any other earlier day is because I was waiting for validation from this pool, right? And it took more than I thought, more than I'd planned for, more than anticipated. And for me, that has always been important, at least to have, when you collect data from people, I think you should also give them an opportunity before you put it out for them to maybe question your methodologies, question how you've analyzed what they've given you, and everything. Which takes me to the next thing you said. There's something you said about that as NGOs, perhaps we also need to reflect a bit on our role within this whole research ecosystem in the sector. Another challenge was this, that some creatives felt like they had been over-researched, right? So today, Churchill from Hivos is going to come to you with a survey. He asks you to respond. Tomorrow, a colleague from another organization comes, asks you to respond to other questions. The other day, a colleague from the University of, I don't know where, comes, asks you questions to respond. Maybe this is something I'd like to listen to in the feedback session from the group. Do we feel over-researched? Is it just that researchers just don't know?
Well, I don't know. I think that that is a challenge. I mean, really. And I mean, I personally, because I sit in the practice of creativity, I grew up writing dramas. So I sit in the practice of creativity, but I also sit in the space of the critical mind, looking at the sector also. And I can tell you, the intellectual fatigue from Canada, from Netherlands, from the UK, South Africa, East Africa, everybody writing emails seeking to have a conversation with you and your assessment is real. And I think the way sometimes we deflate this, and I think this is a skill maybe we need also to give to the sector, is that when you become identified as a potential interviewee, you actually deflate it by volunteering some other person who might not be in the radar of the researchers, so that you are not hogging, the research opportunity. You are also saying, look, I mean, I'm okay, I'm happy to discuss with you, but have you thought about so and so? And you refer them to another collective or another individual who might be doing amazing work, but people do not know who they are. So that we are also extending the net of the interviewees beyond ourselves. And I think, Churchill, you really do point to this issue of the hunger for information from the sector. And the challenge with creativity, and I think we because we all sit there, we know, is that once your mind is interrupted because you are responding to a questionnaire, it's very difficult to go back to the creative mode. So sometimes you want to work for a longer time to advance your thought and so on without having to worry about the questionnaire because it is interfering with your creative process. So I think this is a major challenge, but because if we don't research, you see the research does a couple of things. One, it allows us to know phenomena. It allows us to explain phenomena. It also allows us to anticipate a direction of phenomena, a direction about the world. So through research, we know the world, we explain the world, and we at least anticipate, a future world, which we do not currently experience. We are able to project that future. So if we don't do research, we deny ourselves the opportunity of opening up the slate of knowledge and explaining the world in which we live and its various intersections. It also denies us the opportunity of seeing the future. And the creativity allows us to see the future more than any other sector in the world. I mean, the creative mind can go 50 years from now and project how the world is going to be before our scientists get there. In fact, quite in my view, the scientists follow the artists in terms of projecting. Therefore, when we do research, we are helping the world solve some of its most critical questions, notwithstanding, of course, the challenges that we are talking about. Churchill, I just wanted to underscore the challenge that you raised.
Yeah. I also just wanted to add on that, sometimes we get really fatigued when people keep coming, and I think it's because some of the researched works are never shared as widely as they should be. Because sometimes somebody comes and say, I want to interview you on such a thing. They're like, I have been interviewed, you're not the same parties. Then I'm like, let me get for you the document. And they're like, oh, this is exactly what I was looking for. It has been done before. So sometimes we do not really share a lot of researched information. I don't know whether that one is something we should blame ourselves as universities. Because we have got a lot of universities in this country specifically, but university libraries are not accessible to the public. And I wish there was a way in which all the masters and PhD research that have been done by different universities could find their way into the National Library, since they don't want the public to go to the universities. So if that can be easier, because there's so much information research, but it's not being shared with the public. So that's why people will come again and again, yeah.
I wish we had representation from NACOSTI.
I wish, yeah.
The NACOSTI is the National Council for Science, Technology and Innovation. And there is a requirement, actually, that when you do research in Kenya, you are supposed to deposit a copy with NACOSTI with them. But I also think there is a bigger challenge, because when you do a PhD thesis, for example, on theater or dance, I think that the people in practice might not find that to be very useful because it was for a PhD thesis. I think it's the packaging also, the way we package our research, because if you're saying that we want the sector to be deeply involved, we must package our research findings in formats that are also creative, in formats that are accessible to the sector. And I think that is really coming up with the multiple formats so that, when you release a powerful report like this, I would like this to be also in an audiovisual, format so that I can digest it, in a different platform. So I think it's this multiple forms of presenting research findings and the academizing, minimizing the academic language to do that. And of course, it's a big challenge. Sometimes it's the collaboration. I think when we do research, sometimes we are so detached. I think it's the partnership between the researcher and the practitioner, the informant, if you want to call them informants, so that you own the product. So I think these are critical challenges, and again, I think we need to engage in Nacosti in terms of, because there are things they should also be doing which they are not doing.
Yeah, I think I'd like to face this way now. And since these are most of us here are artists, right? There's this thing imagined nowadays of research as art making, that you will have artists in Kenya, for example, like Onyis, for example, who he presented some works a couple of years ago at Circle, and you could see the work, and you could tell that this work could only be made by someone who invested in either, even if it's a short or a long process of seeking knowledge about something. And the other thing that I keep seeing in artwork that's being exhibited in Nairobi and even just globally is having testimonials in the form of quotes, in the form of video excerpts, in the form of audio excerpts. So I think it's also important to acknowledge that the community we are with here today also engages in one way or the other in some forms of art making. Recently I was writing something and I had to reach out to Mado and Gado to cite a cartoon that they made about whatever thing I was writing about, because I thought it was important to include that voice there within that traditionally formatted document that I was submitting, right? I think we can open this discussion now. My mouth is dry now.
So if you got any question, any point of clarification, just raise your hand. We shall bring the mic to you. So it starts from that end. Number 2, who's number 3? Number 3, so okay, take the first.
Yeah, thank you. My name is James. I am the most boring person in the room because I'm just a lawyer. But I do represent creatives. There's a very interesting, when you talk about research, there have been instances where an artist could be part of a research project, and eventually the project yields a product that can actually be sold and make money, but they never actually do get money based on what the information that they give up for that research. Because the two of you have this experience, what would be your advice for artists when someone comes to you and tells you, or comes into your community and they say, we want to know what the sounds of your community are? I think we've seen, for instance, someone came to Kenya, sat in a marketplace, recorded something, and before we knew it, it was in a Beyonce song. That lady who was at the market, I don't know if she ever got a dime, out of that. So is there a place where a creative in that research area can still get paid for the information that they give? And if not immediately, is it possible to get into agreements where we say that in future, should this ever be something that is a product, then I'd like to make a cut out of it. I know I start as a lawyer, but there's also the practicality. Legally, it is there, but there's a practicality of it. Yeah. Who is
There
that
was
addressed
a
to?
second question. Oh.
Good evening, everybody. My question is from a more research and scholarly way. ZP has spoken about the sort of outdated methods of collecting data, and Prof has talked about the presentation of data, which is also, so to speak, the methods are outdated. But you're the guys who are sitting there. So what are you doing to update the system?
Do we take one more or, okay.
Mine wasn't really a question, it was more of a comment. When someone said the creative industry is under-researched, I just wanted to say, I don't think it's under-researched, it's just that people don't share the research. From someone who's also in the industry, like we receive so many reports. British Council has done a report, the Germans have done a report, the Dutch have done a report. There's so many reports that are constantly being just replicated. So I understand also people feeling like they are being over-researched. We also feel like we're being overly handed out reports. So even also like when I got this report, I'm also very curious about like what is unique about it, because I can see a lot of things that are similar to what British Council has already done, what Kikobo has already done. Yeah, so I don't think the industry is under-researched. It is heavily researched, just that people don't share it for some reason. I have no idea.
Okay, I think I can start by, let me not say respond, but just continue with that statement where Sheila has left it. For me, personally, this whole topic of under-research, yes, it's for me, I reflected on it a bit. It's a contentious phrase to use. But what I sort of mean by that is also research that is owned by the people who will be consuming this data. And I think for me, one of the things about research that in the very short time that I've been able to engage is there's always this element of goodwill, right? So like how pure or how natural or how original are your intentions while doing this? So when I talk about under research, for example, one of the things I mean is how many, for example, research documents do we have that have been submitted to NACOSTI, right? So they cancel. So it means research that has actually been done through the process that government lays out for how you should do research in Kenya, right? Which means you should write a proposal, submit it to NACOSTI. They take a bit of time to review it, then they come back to you. As much as that process is problematic, in some way, I find it important. It qualifies some, yes, it disqualifies some. Maybe it will even disqualify some of these. But I think there's a bit of pride that comes into with having research that has been done by people who are Kenyans, people who are in the sector, using funding that there's clarity around, you know, where that funding is originated and how it is connected to the larger interventions in the sector. So that's what I mean.
Yeah, I think I'll just pick randomly, maybe pick from what are we doing? At least I can say what I'm doing. I think we're doing some stuff. I believe very strongly in the decolonization of the academy, and we have been working really hard to decolonize the universities, the teaching universities, to ensure that we are creating knowledge that helps the continent of Africa. Because most of our professors were trained in the Western tradition, and they have brought that mindset of the Western tradition without interrogating it. So we are doing our best in terms of interrogating the methodologies, at least at the level of the academy, and we are doing it, at different levels. Although right now I'm not situated in a university, my engagement with universities is rather intense, and not just within the country, but also on the continent. So we are doing work in terms of decolonization of the academy and really pushing for Africa-centric perspectives and flexibility in terms of the ways in which we do research and repackage research, especially in the social sciences and so on. So I think we are doing that. The other thing that we are doing, at least from my desk, is really deep engagement with the practice. So, for example, in our Jahazi journal, which is an arts, culture, and performance journal, one of the principles of that journal is to ensure that at least 50% of the articles in that journal are from practice, are from practitioners in the arts space. And we do that through interviews. When you interview someone from the art space, they get the byline. The researcher does not get the byline, and so on. And so we have interviews, we have short pieces like 500 words, 1,200 words, of course, recognizing the limitation of writing from the sector. So we are doing this, and I think you can check most the staff, and thanks Hivos. I mean, we set up the Wabunifu portal at www.wabunifu.org with support from Hivos. You'll find the journal available under Creative Commons regime, and you are able to see some of the articles that have come from people in the industry as a way of decolonizing again the ways in which knowledge is assumed to be only produced from academy, while in reality, the bulk of the knowledge comes from practice. So I think we are doing that, and I think my sister will also respond. But I just wanted to make a comment to James. I think that in research, one of the things that we try to do is have get people to sign the release form. And I know we sign this all the time. So as I'm working with you, you release the information. When it comes to academic work, in most cases, the release allows you to use it's basically fair use for academic purposes. But of course, there is always the opportunity to say that in the event, substantial amount of money or a certain amount of money, a certain threshold is reached, then you are entitled to a percentage of that information. But you will realize that maybe for me to generate a research report, I will have talked with lots and lots of people, and it will be very difficult to do attribution. I might quote you once or twice, and that's about it. So it really, really depends, but we do have the release forms for purposes of allowing me to use your material. But I think that my colleagues could add onto that. And just again, very briefly, I think that the certain areas of creativity are researched and other areas are not well researched, because we talked about the diversity and the breadth of the sector. So how much do we know in terms of research about contemporary dance in Kenya, for example? Do we have enough? How much do we know about the intersection of cartooning and political consciousness? When for the first time we saw Daniel Arap Moi in his underwear. He was in his underwear in a cartoon in the 1980s. What did that actually do to the mental consciousness of Kenyans, instead of in terms of unmasking power and kind of reducing it to that level of the underwear, and so on. So I think we haven't done enough. in certain areas. I think we may have done quite a bit in other areas. I think just opening the canvas a little more to see what it is that we haven't done. Yeah, I think that's all I would like to comment, and maybe ZP can add, with your permission.
I think I'll just speak from where Prof has left. If you can always claim ignorance if somebody uses your work which you released for research to make money, because in the ethical considerations form when you sign it, if that person was collecting research, there should be a place where it's written, this work is for research and not for monetary purposes. So if you signed anywhere and the person goes and makes millions from it, you can always get a good lawyer. I think recently we had a guy who invented M-Pesa being paid lots of money because that time he was a student and whatever he bargained for was below par, isn't it? So you can always, and if it can be proven that you at that particular moment, the people were exploiting you, then it's okay. But I also think as a community, basically, I don't know whether to say as Africans or Kenyans, we are not that conscious about our creative rights and our intellectual rights and even just right of sharing information, because we give, like when somebody comes to us for research, we should give information, but we should ask where. But a lot of us don't even want to sign a paper to be able to give information. Always ensure you sign a paper and always ensure you remain with a copy, because we always sign and we give the copy. How many times do we remain with a copy? You are told, okay, we can photocopy, we'll send you a copy. No, remain with the copy. If they need to, let them take a photo of that copy, but you should remain with your copy always, signed by both parties. So a lot of times it is us as the community, we need to empower, now let me talk to Mandy, we need to empower the community more on agreements, understanding the agreements and signing them and knowing their limits, because I think even as artists, that's really a place that's lacking, not just at the university, but artists in general. Yes, my dear, you asked, what are we doing? We are doing so much. At the moment, I think as a lecturer, I am doing my part in teaching in practical, method-oriented ways. I think if there's any, I don't know if, I can't see any of my students here, but if there's any student of mine in the room, I think I'm the most practical lecturer they have ever met. Maybe too practical. But also the Center for University of Education, they have really approved that nowadays for performing artists, our works can be recognized. However, the only challenge we have is that a lot of universities have not yet implemented it. Like I said, it is on paper that if you do a full feature-length movie, it will be recognized, like you can get 10 points or 20 points. However, they still want you to write a report on that work instead of bringing the film and the script for them to see. You get what I mean? So if I can write 3 pages for a peer-reviewed journal, and after doing the full-length feature, I still need to write 3 pages of a report, then that's what we're like, can't you just watch the movie and know that I did work and I used a script and here's the poster for the marketing plan and give me the 20 points. So right now, there's still the challenge of, yes, it's being recognized, but it's also given such low points. Like if when a journal is being given like 12 points, the film is being given like 5 points. So those are challenges that we still have. Yes, there's a lot of things happening, but it's a step at a time. We believe if this was approved just like 5 years ago, it's a first step in the right direction. So as lecturers, we are doing our part in very small ways. I believe if we are 20 and we each do in small ways, in 5 years, the small ways will be big enough. Yes.
Okay, we can take 3 more questions. And if you can kindly direct it to the panelists you want to answer your question. Are there any more 3 burning questions? All right.
Okay, my name is Boniface Wali. And first of all, I'd like to congratulate Ivos on this. I think it's a great report. I'm particularly excited that one of the topics that has been addressed in this report is on the issues of financial management for the creative sector. I think that's a very powerful area to research on as far as the arts and culture space is concerned. My question has more to do with the methods of dissemination, because I feel like that's one area where researchers in general, not specific to our space, there's a big gap in terms of how the research that is produced in all the different spaces across Kenya is consumed by people in our communities, because it feels like it's a very academic exercise, or it's very specific to a particular group of people. Whereas, in my view, I feel it would be more impactful, for example, if out of the research that is published, there was a media story around it, that there's a particular finding here that deserves media attention and that can really draw people's attention to this subject. And glancing through the report very quickly, one of the things I noted was, for example, a recommendation on having the policies around digital spaces reviewed. I think this is a very important thing, but then if it's in a report and we read it amongst ourselves and then it ends there, has it really created the impact that we intended it to? So perhaps maybe you can share your experiences in terms of where those gaps are in terms of bringing this information to the public domain through platforms like the media and the general public. Yeah.
Great. Any other person? Okay.
Hi. So I just want to reinforce exactly what he said, access and dissemination. So the number of people in this room who have direct access to this, I mean, this is very powerful information, but how will it get to the rest of the creatives who maybe need it a lot? And then, that. I think the rest of the stuff maybe is just legal stuff, and we can discuss later.
And one more question. All right, I see we are good. Back to you, Churchill.
I think for Emmaus, the and then was the interesting part. I'd like to hear that. But I could just respond, then I could also... I'd like, first of all, to respond by recognizing the presence here of two people who are very important in this process. So there's a gentleman called Martin Omondi. Martin was really key in coming up with the financial management toolkit. And then Andrew, I don't know where Andrew has gone. Andrew, so essentially, so you had the regional director mentioning that there are contacts there for people you can reach out to for assistance with those kinds of things. So Martin is one of them. Andrew is, he's in a very, very brightly screaming sky blue, what do you call that? A windbreaker. You'll see him. He's gonna walk in. So he's the one who came up with, he was really important, his input was really important in coming up with the intellectual property toolkit. To respond to your question, Boniface and Emmaus as well, part of how I conceived this, that's Andrew. Andrew, you're officially my running mate. So part of how I conceived this activity was to invite artists themselves in the very many, from the very many collectives that I could. I invited as well organizations like Goethe Institute, British Council. So Sheila, the lady who was asking the question around under research, is from Goethe Institute. I see representation from Power 254 here. I see representation from collectives like Karen Village, yours, Kuona Artist Collective, Dust Depot, Masai Mbili should be here as well. Brush 2 is here. So that was the other category of people. We did invite media as well. Then, as you can see as well, we have academia in the room. And then also there should be some students from here. There should be students from USIU. We have representation of students here from USIU. They're raising their hands. They're all over the place, especially in the back. I don't know why. We have representation as well from other universities like KU here. So I thought, and part of why I did that, especially for the students, is because I honestly feel like there gets to a level where practitioners to some level just get tired of seeing toolkits and and toolkits and how to do documents. You know, people just want to make money, you know, and it's understandable. So that's why I kind of had that strategy towards inviting people here. But I hear you, we could do more and we're going to do more. And as the regional director mentioned earlier on, these publications are also available online. Maybe there's room for interpretation. So when I did share these publications with colleagues in Tanzania, ahead of a launch that will be happening there and in Uganda as well, and particularly for Tanzania, there was huge interest in the financial management toolkit. And one of the things was, tungependelea sana kama ungeza kuitafsiri, if you could translate it into Swahili. So Martin, I don't know if you're up to the task, but there's demand, there's that kind of demand. Yeah, not to say that we're doing all, but there's more that could be done. Yeah.
Yeah. There's always more to be done, really. And Boniface, it's nice to see you again. We were together yesterday. It's like we're really, it's like you are really reading me closely. So I think it's always developing a dissemination plan, okay? So you have the product. So how do you get it available in different formats? Because it must be in different formats. I know, for example, in our last issue of Jahazi, which it's on on cultural heritage, we got, I think, about 4 articles in the media from the again, working with the media houses to extract the articles and to kind of align them to the media, format, the print media format. And I think that some of this is tough, especially where products are available under a Creative Commons regime, which means they're not copyrighted. The sector itself can own, the product and find multiple ways of, maximizing its reach and its spread. I mean, there would absolutely nothing wrong with pushing this on Facebook, especially critical messages that we find, because we own we own the knowledge. It's for us. It's for our improvement. Therefore, pushing it through different formats. And in fact, even where it's copyrighted, there is a way in which working with the originator, with the publisher, certain stories could be extracted and realigned for particular audiences. So I think that there is an effort to do that. I think that we are very conscious of audiences. And remember what I said at the beginning. It depends on what you want the research to do for you, I recall, I mean, in my graduate studies, we studied Bob Marley. We actually studied Bob Marley, and we studied a lot of other musicians, The chief executive officer of the Commission for University Education in Kenya has a book on Giuliani. He's the one who approves, he provides oversight on university curricula. He has a book on Giuliani. The Church is My Pulpit. That's the title of the book. And he has written also on Benga and so forth and so on. So it's not like people are not doing these things. It's just that sometimes the knowledge is not reaching us. And it might not be reaching us because of the way it's packaged. So I think we will continue improving. We'll continue making these things available. We are aware of the limitation, but I think we just take the challenge and keep moving. And then you ask yourself, what is my responsibility in making this knowledge available, so that you are not giving other people the big task of doing everything, because you yourself have agency. You yourself can actually get things moving.
I think you just took the words from my mouth. I wanted to ask, are you looking for the information also? Because sometimes there's so much on the internet. There is so much on the internet, and nowadays Google is your friend. If you just Google, like the moment they put this in digital form on the HIVO's website and you look for it, it will pop up. And when it pops up, how many of us really research on Google? Or do we just click on the first three that come? Do you always click next page of Google? Because sometimes the first page of Google is just giving you the very exciting stuff. And then, like, let me say, you Google zip your coat, you will see that on the first page is just zip your coat, juicy. Then you go page 2, 3 of zip your coat, then you realize, she was there in 2003, 2005. You get what I mean? So how are you Googling? And we can really disseminate as much information as possible. But if you're not interested in doing enough research, if you really don't want to do it to your own benefit, or if you're just not interested in reading it, then you will not get the information. Even if we brought this book, like the way you've distributed, if you don't want to read this book, you can carry this book home. And 1 year later, you will not have read it, isn't it? How many times do we carry this? So sometimes it's not about dissemination. Sometimes it's also about whoever is getting this information. Are you really interested in that information? Are you researching? Do you just want even to read about it? Because if we don't have that interest, then I think it will be hard. But nevertheless, Churchill, I think now this is a challenge to you. I agree with the prof. And this is the time we ask for a job. I think we can do short courses on Facebook based on that financial management toolkit, based on this toolkit for creatives in Kenya. This is in Kenya, Uganda, and Tanzania. If we are doing a short course on Facebook, a lot of people in Africa will be able to read it. Even if you're doing it 2 hours every week, people will be able, and it's HIVO, so it's free for everyone. People will be able to watch that. So that one, a podcast, because we are talking about new methods. Those are the new methods. WhatsApp is not looking like a very official form of communication. But today, me and my colleagues were just realizing that WhatsApp is even used more than Zoom, because that's where we send the course outlines, we send the coursework, we send the workbooks, we send almost everything there. Then we go back to Zoom and talk. But we forget that WhatsApp is there. So, yeah.
I think that's all from our end. Thank you so much for your indulgence and making time.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Well, around another good round of applause. I think you've gotten something from them, right? So please, take your seats again. So once again, thank you so much. At this point in time, just to let you know that we got... we got some interesting performances coming up. We got Winyo in the house. We got Feliciana. You'll get to know who they are. We got Rabi and Sharon Atieno, all preparing to entertain us. So let's just take a short break, grab a drink, grab some meals, and then we allow the sound people to set up, and then let's come back for the entertainment. Karibuni sana.